You want me to just start?
Hey
Or do you
everybody,
say?
welcome to a new session of Come Cloud with Us. My name is Abdul Kazi and I have my host Chris. Hey Chris, how's it going?
Going well, thank you, sir. Good to see everybody back for another session. How's things with you?
Good, good. It's been a little bit toasty up in Toronto, so I'm sure we're feeling the pain.
Oh yeah, yep. At least we get a little bit of breeze from the lake between us, but yeah, it's still it's up there. It's toasty. So
I know. I were complaining in the winter time. You'll be complaining it's too cold, so we're never happy, eh?
no.
Anyways, we got a great speaker today. So Sajid is here from the UK, and first of all, you know, very grateful for Sajid for being here because I know it's midnight over there, so really appreciate that, Sajid. And then, um, you want to introduce yourself, talk about your background, how you got into IT. Just give us some background.
Uh, Actually, I got into IT quite accidentally, sort of ish. Uh,
Mm.
I have a degree in economics, and I worked in finance for a few years, and I realized I absolutely hated it. And then I thought, what else can I do? And I'd grown up where IT was just about starting. So I had an Amstrad at home. My brother had an Amstrad. He was doing computing. He had an old Atari, an Amiga, and I thought, okay, I'll try and give this thing a go. And luckily for me, I was working for a stockbroking firm at the time, and they put in Active Directory AD, and nobody looked after it. And the only time I ever seen AD fall over, nobody looked after it. They set you up. It ran for about a year, then it died. And they
Mm.
were looking for someone to help them. And I thought, I don't know anything about IT, but I'm just going to volunteer. And that's why I started. And then worked first line, second line, third line. I did a lot of time in engineering. And I work as an architect. I still prefer engineering, though, to be honest with you. Even when I build stuff, even when I design stuff, I like building it before I design it, especially if it's new stuff or not used before. It's the only way my mind works, to be honest with you. So, yeah, that's a quick background into how I got into IT.
that's a pretty
Nice.
awesome story.
Yeah,
I
that's
like to
pretty
call out the
impressive.
AD there too. So
Gives us, kind of our age because yeah, like a lot of new folks they have no idea. They're basically born in the cloud, everything, right?
yeah.
So people are like, oh, what is AD? Like, oh yeah, on-prem stuff. What is that? And like a lot of people don't even know physical servers. Like we used to be in the back day. Like you used to create physical servers and then
Yep.
software and whatnot. So yeah.
I worked quite a lot for ISPs, and I used to do. I was NetApp certified, so we go in the data centers and put in enterprise grade storage and servers, rack them, run all the cabling, get told off for not being neat enough, that sort of stuff. And it's like nowadays nobody knows that stuff. Nobody bothers.
Mm.
No.
Nobody has any interaction with it. We've got a museum here in Bradford, and
Mm.
they've got this glass wall on the floor that you walk through, and it's got all technology, and talks about the telephone and how it might emerged and what it was. And like, you tell your children, we used to go down to the bottom of the street to a red phone box, put in coins and dial, and they look at you, think that's just weird. And then you talk about mobile phones are the area that we used to pull out and flip out the front, and you go walk through this museum, and they've got them on display on the floor, and you can see them on the floor, and they talk to you about the history. And your children look at this, and they used to be this big, and they look at them and think, "Wow, this stuff actually existed." So they spoil with what they've got today. They don't
Right.
realize, the evolution technology has gone through to where they are today.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And kind of talk about what kind of interesting projects are you working now? Like what area of cloud are you focused on these days?
Um,
Are you mainly Azure? And what piece of app? Because Azure even so big and M365.
so right now I'm doing a couple of projects where I'm designing, well, a DR solution for a customer. So across region DR solution
Mm.
um, for their capability. And then the other bit I'm working on at the moment is providing a secure access solution for administrators. So privileged access workstation. So and there's a few other offerings like CyberArk. We did a CyberArk evaluation,
Oh, nice.
and you look at the capability that CyberArk brings, and there's a massive overlap between what that does and what Azure brings for you. So do you want to go CyberArk? Do you want to go Azure? So they've got dual control. Azure's got PIM, privileged identity management. And so depends which way you want to go. CyberArk has some strengths, but when it comes to Azure, there's a lot of that capability that already exists. I had a conversation recently with because I work for ISP, so we interact with other customers, and they're mainly an AWS house, and they're using not AVD, AWS workspaces, and a lot of the security that you can get natively or through licensing, like integration with Intune, conditional access, and that capability doesn't exist natively in AWS. So we were talking about extending Intune, conditional access, posture assessment through Defender for Cloud, for example, using Azure Arc or onboarding that capability for their AWS deployed Windows services. So I'm doing a lot of that at the moment. A lot of security, a lot of conditional access. So I've done a mixture of stuff. I do a lot of infrastructure, but I've also done Intune deployments in the past. On board, when it was COVID for NHS, we were just onboarding. We were migrating the NHS from their BlackBerry to Intune for their mobile device management. And then we used it to push out VPN connectivity and stuff like that. And recently, again, we're looking at pushing out VPN connectivity using AD integration and MFA as opposed to using certificate-based authentication. So we've been testing that recently.
Wow, that's an interesting project, actually. Yeah, just the learning out of that, especially NHS, the compliancy, the data. Yeah, because right now working for my company is consulting for a public sector, one of the provinces in Canada, and yeah, the amount of compliancy we have to go through is just off the charts. Like the quote unquote red tape is like so much, like forget the technology, just getting over that hurdle that's the biggest piece, more than technology. So yeah.
I think that's the case with any public sector. I mean, here is the same. I've done a lot of private sector work, and you look and you think I could have done this in 12 weeks if I'm doing this in the private sector, and it's 6 months later and I'm still doing this here. And a lot of it's the processes and the technology, and some of the organizations have this catalog where they've tested the technology, they're happy to use it, and they've got a support mechanism for that. And you can all use the technology that's in that catalog. And if you want to introduce something new, you got to go through all the governance gates to get it approved, and then run a proof of concept, and then find out who's got the skill to be able to support it after you've deployed it. So yeah, there's a lot of red tape. I think that's the same in any government organization, no matter where you go.
Yeah. I know. With that being said, we'll jump into your presentation. So
Am I still sharing? Yeah.
Yes. So now we are seeing the Copilot.
Oh, cool. I'll come back to that in a second. There's a reason that's there. So I'm just going to run through a couple of slides and we'll do a demo on this.
Excellent.
So just share this. So let's have a look. Presentation. So this is just a thing about me. So I'm currently working for a net company. Net company's Denmark's largest IT provider, and they do a lot of government contracts here in the UK. So I work as a senior infrastructure architect for them. I'm an MCT Azure architect. I've done the AWS Foundation Architect exam, but I don't really do too much in AWS. I do get involved occasionally. My Twitter handle's there, my LinkedIn handle, for anybody that wants to reach out or keep in touch. This. It appeared, I think. It's disappeared. Okay, that's just a title screen. Look, there we go. Hey. And so story time. So this was based on a UK story that I told a while back. So the year was 2020, the same year that gave us COVID lockdowns, also gave us a lot of hacks, especially Twitter. I know everybody around here uses Twitter, especially for IT. It was a social engineering hack where some of the Twitter tools were hacked, and people used those tools to promote a Bitcoin scam. And tweets were posted by Elon Musk, Barack Obama, people like Joe Biden, Bill Gates, and even organizations like Apple and Uber. But the point, why am I telling the story? One of the main learnings from this was this could have been prevented if MFA had been enabled. Now, MFA is enabled now, but there are other conditions, other signals that we can take a look at when looking at conditional access and the capability that it brings. The screen that I had up earlier, when we're looking at this one, I was looking at Copilot because I was looking at the UK and issues that happen in the UK, but because my hosts are currently Canada and New York, I didn't realize Chris was in New York. I was just looking up organizations in Canada that had similar kind of issues. So even as early as 2002, 2004, Copilot, I just put a search in Copilot to say organizations that could have been benefit from MFA or conditional access. And even now, still, you've got issues like Snowflake enforcing conditional access policies would require MFA limit access based on device compliance, and use roles could reduce the risk of unauthorized access to customer accounts. Now, we'll have a look at how we do this through conditional access, but you're still finding organizations that could benefit from conditional access or something as widespread as MFA, but are still not using it even today. But we'll have a look at what conditional access brings to the table and how you can configure it to limit data loss or breaches within your organization. It also gave us a new way to test ISA. I know lots of people had were suffering from COVID, but in the UK, some of the politicians decided to take a test drive to Barnard Castle to see if it would fix their eyesight. Now, that was a big story, controversial story in the UK, but I couldn't find any kind of story like that in Canada. So I think you guys fared better with controversy and COVID than we did. Now, what is conditional access? Now, Microsoft defines conditional access as conditional access is an intelligent policy engine that helps organizations better control how users access corporate resources. That's a lot of words, but what does it really mean? To break it down and simplify it, it's essentially an if-then statement. If a condition is met, access is granted. If a condition or multiple conditions are not met, access is denied, or other conditions are imposed. So if you're logging into a secure environment and you're providing a username and password, it could be that you're challenged for MFA. It could be that other conditions are defined, like you have to come from a particular device. Because you're not coming from that particular device, even if you're providing username, password, and MFA, you're going to be denied access. And we'll look at how we can actually configure this within a conditional access. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Now, this is a quote from Sun Tzu. Why am I quoting this here? Is because conditional access provides you the capability to mitigate issues before they actually occur. It gives you logs that you can look up, where it gives you conditions that you can define, and those, like I said, those conditions need to be met, and you will be granted access. And if they're not met, you're denied access. This is a preventative measure that you can take up front for the type of environment that you're in. You can be less restrictive for some users and more restrictive for others. So you can have different kinds of policies apply to different kinds of users depending on what risk they represent in your organization. So this quote works well. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle, because taking the approach with conditional access and the capability it brings reduces a breach, and therefore you're not having to have that battle because you already prevented it by taking steps beforehand. As I mentioned, conditional access is an if-then statement. So it takes a bunch of signals. It makes a decision on that signal. So it takes a bunch of signals here, makes a decision on that signal, allow access, and then those that decision that is made is enforced. So common signals come from user identity itself, Defender for endpoint, the endpoint devices where you install Defender for endpoint, and then it's a continuous risk assessment and automation. So it's not you're in, you're good. You can have policies that say if you want to elevate your privileges, for example, you integrate PIM with conditional access, you're then challenged again for MFA if that's how you configured your PIM. So this is a continuous assessment if you want to elevate your privileges. And PIM, for those that don't know, is privilege identity management. It allows you to log into Azure with just standard privileges, but then you get time-bound access to higher privileges that you elevate your rights to. And it could be auto approved. It could be a request to approval process. It's slightly off topic, but we can take a look at that as well. Use cases. So MFA, enforceable critical applications, device compliance policies, which is in Intune, so you can have a conditional access that says the device you're coming from has to be compliant. Ensure only managed and compliant devices access your resources. Location-based access control, so you can say we're allowing it from these particular countries, or we're allowing it from these particular egress IP addresses, and they're the only countries or IP addresses that you can connect your resources from. Everything else is blocked. Risk-based policies. This requires premium P2. We'll take a look at the licensing in a moment. And you can apply this to application-specific policies. So either line of business application or standard applications, like all the Entra ID portals that you use to access and manage Microsoft Entra ID. And you can also apply these to guests into your environment. I think I have a better slide than this. Bear with me, guys. So, sorry guys, it's late and I forgot how to use Edge. Bear with me. There we go. So I'll put this into the chart. So this is just talking about the licensing. So you've got Entra ID, the free edition, P1 and P2. So if you look at P2, free you don't get any conditional access. So P2 you need, P1 gives you conditional access, it gives you continuous access evaluation. But also when you look at risk-based protection, you need Entra ID P2 for risk-based authentication, also for vulnerability and risk assessment, and for device filters and conditional access. And we'll take a look at this capability when we look at the demo. You need Entra ID Premium P2 license for this. And it's demo time. That's good. So if you're new to Azure, when you log into portal.azure.com, if you want to get to Entra ID, navigate to conditional access, navigate to Entra ID, scroll down to security, and then scroll to conditional access. You can also get to it by going to the Entra ID blade itself, navigate to protection, and then to conditional access. And also, if you're using Intune, again, it's the same. You can get to it from within here, within policies. If I can remember where it is. I'll find it. I'll come back to that in a minute. Bear with me. So in conditional access, you have any configured policies will be shown on the initial blade here, and it shows you ability to deploy a new policy, apply it from a template, and upload a policy file. And the policy file, if you're going to upload it, it wants this in a JSON format. We'll have a look at how you can create one in a moment. Also, you have named locations. So we were talking about in the slide deck where you want to define a particular location where you can connect from, whether it's IP based or whether it's a country location. So if you want to limit yourself from certain countries, you can define country locations in here. And as you can see, there's a long list of countries. So give it a name, allowed country list. And then as you scroll down, you can just tick the countries that you want. You can select every country that you want. Or you can just search for countries that you want, United Kingdom, for example. And then create that one. You can create a ban list. And then, so if you look at this one as an example, this is exactly the same thing. It lists all the countries that you don't want to have, and you can have allow or deny for different capabilities, whether you can come from this country or not come from this country. So it depends how you want to specify. You can also do it through IP address location. You can put IP address in here, define IP addresses. So if you look at this example that's already deployed here, so we're allowing 10.0.0.0.2/24. This particular IP address range is allowed, everything else is not. If you configure that within our conditional access policy. The other thing that you can do is for users inside your organization, outside your organization, having to accept the terms of use when connecting to any services that you deploy. This is a PDF file that you will upload. So you give it a name, you browse to a PDF file. So the easiest way to do it is write your terms of use in Word, save it as a PDF file, and then just upload it. And then you have this capability that says require users to expand the terms of use. So if it's a couple of pages long, they have to at least force them to scroll to the bottom before, even if they read it or don't read it, you can't really enforce that, but force them to scroll to the bottom. Requires user consent on every device. So instead of, if they accessing the same application on their tablet, then on their phone, then on another PC, they require consent 3 times on every single device that they're logging onto. And then the consent expires. So every 3 months, every 6 months, depending on what you define, they have to reconsent to your terms of use for using those particular applications that you publish out to the users. If you want to create a policy, all you do is click on New Policy, give it a name, Demo Policy 1. And then assignments, who you can assign this to. So you can assign it to no one, all users, and it gives you this warning here: don't lock yourself out. So if you're wanting to apply a policy and you're applying it in a test environment or live environment, make sure you excluded set users, some global administrators, your own account if you're the one that's configuring the policies. So when you're testing it, you have a way to get back in and change anything if it doesn't work as expected. And then if you want to target it, you can target to guest or external users, as you saw in the demo. So it includes B2B collaboration and B2B direct connect, directory roles. So if you select this, you have the choice of one or more roles that you want to. So you apply this to global administrators, for example, take global administrators, global readers. If you want to apply this to other roles, you can apply it to other roles over here. You can apply it to users and groups. So in here, it gives you all users and groups in your environment, specific users or specific groups. It's easier to deploy it to a group because then you drop users into a group. The conditions are applied. If you take them out of the group, the conditions are removed. But in our example, we just apply it to one of our test users. And then select. You can exclude users in here. So as I mentioned, ensure you exclude someone. So I'll exclude myself in this example. So if you're applying a policy, you don't lock yourself out. And if you notice down here, by default now, policy is enabled in report only mode. So it gives you, it will tell you if the policy applies, it will report on it, and I'll show you where to have a look at that, but it won't actually apply the policy. And then you can have a look at whether it applies or whether it doesn't apply, with the effects of that. And if you want to enable it, or then turn the policy off. And what you want to apply the policy to: cloud apps, user actions, authentication, context. So you have these options that you can apply it to. In our example, let's look at cloud apps. So no apps, all cloud apps. Again, it tells you don't lock yourself out, or selected apps. If you look at the selection, it gives you apps that you can access. Office 365 portal, Microsoft admin portals, and there's a whole bunch of other portals over here. So if you put Entra, for example, I think it might give us, no. Azure. So again, Azure AD, Identity and Governance Portal, Azure Cosmos DB Portal. So it depends what you want to do. If you've got line of business applications registered within Azure AD, you will also see them in here as well. And then, so select an application that you want to apply it to. Let's now example apply it to the Azure portal. And we're not going to exclude any apps for the demo. If you look here, you've got this network capability here. And we were looking at locations. So we can enable this, any trusted network location, all trusted network locations, selected network locations. So any trusted network locations, what we defined previously. So if you were looking at named locations. So we've defined, I'm not sure what's going on there, but you get the point. So previously we had a look at named locations and it showed us those locations that we had configured for allow or by IP or by country origin. So you can define them over here. So you can also have a look at the same list here. So if you look at select network location, so where do you want to apply it to? Allowed country list, allowed country list. So we can select this one, which is we're allowing it for the UK only. This is the one that I configured as a demo. We looked at it from an IP perspective. So IP ranges, if you want to allow those to, so you can save that. You can exclude where you don't want to allow them from. Then you look at conditions, what you want to do, what conditions need to be met. So user risk, again, as I mentioned, signing risk, you require a premium P2 license. And you configure low, medium risk, or high risk. So is your users that you're targeting high, medium risk? So are your users privileged users, global administrators? And if they were compromised, would they then be high risk? So or medium risk? You can have, and then you can have a signing risk again, high, medium, low. So the kind of risk that you want to protect against. And then device and platforms. Again, inside risk, I haven't done too much with the inside risk. It says the users risk data related activity within Microsoft Purview. So we need a Purview license for this to work. And then device and platforms, what you want to apply it to? Windows devices, Android devices, Mac OS. So you have a plethora of devices that are covered here. You can also exclude devices if you wanted to. So we'll apply this to selected devices in our example. So Windows devices only. We won't exclude any devices. And because we've selected two network locations here, allowed IP list here in your conditions, they're already pre-populated here for you. Again, this is the same blade. Client apps, if you have any client apps, browser mobile. So control access to target specific client applications not using modern authentication. If you want to configure that, then you can enable that here as well. Leave that off for now. Filter devices is something we spoke about. I'll come back to that one. But essentially what it allows you to do is configure filters for devices. But we'll have a look at that in a moment. We'll come back to that one. And then if you have a look at grant, now do you want to allow access or block access? So if you block access, what you're saying there is once all these conditions are met for anybody, we're going to block access for all those particular users that meet those particular conditions. If we want to grant access, what do we want them to do? So do they require multi-factor authentication? This is a legacy way of doing it. You can be more granular, more specific, and you can have multiple policies for different types of risks that you have. So you can say I require authentication strength. Then if you look here, it gives you the ability to say it requires multi-factor authentication, username, password, text message. So for standard users that are using some of your services that you define as low risk, you might be happy with them using username, password, and MFA from a text message. But for users that are privileged users, especially as we were speaking about government organization, NHS trusts, other government organizations that require higher level authentication, for those kind of users, you might want to enforce FIDO2 keys, phishing resistant MFA. So for those kind of users, you might configure a separate policy that says for all those users, you can only have FIDO2 keys. So username, password, MFA, and that's all we're going to give you. So you have multiple policies depending on what your target audience is. Whereas previously you can only configure one set of capability here. Then you can define other things in here. So terms of use that we spoke about earlier, that we briefly looked at. If you want that to be enforced through conditional access, where they have to accept the terms of use for the applications that they're logging into or the client portals that they're logging into, then you can enable that here. Requires the device to be marked as compliant. So we briefly looked at Intune. So essentially what we're saying here is any device that you're coming from has to be marked as compliant. And what we mean by that is within conditional access, within Intune, you have devices that you enroll into Intune. So if we step back slightly, you have Entra ID, used to be Azure AD. and you can have different types of identity for your devices. So you can have hybrid identity where your devices are on premises and you're using something like Entra ID sync. Okay, I know what it's doing. Apologies. We'll come back to that. So you have Entra ID sync where it synchronizes that identity to Azure AD or Entra ID, and then you can enroll those devices into Azure AD. So when you look at the policies here, you can say required devices to be hybrid domain joined. So those devices have identity in your legacy on-premise Active Directory services, and those identities are replicated to Entra ID, Azure AD, and they are present there. So if you were to tick this box, you would say you need your identity exist in two places, on-premise and here. So it needs to be a hybrid identity. If you're saying your device needs to be compliant, it needs to exist in Entra ID as a hybrid or a pure Entra ID joined device, and then exist in in here. So when we look at our devices, we've got some Windows devices enrolled in this test environment, and these devices are Azure AD joined only, and they're managed by Microsoft Intune. And in here, you have under managed devices, you have some compliance policies that you configure. Then you apply to those particular devices. So if you look at this basic Windows 10 compliance policy, what we're saying is on that particular device that you're coming from, firewall has to be enabled, antivirus has to be installed, anti-spyware has to be enabled, Defender for endpoint has to be enabled, as in malware protection, real-time protection has to be enabled, device security around simple password, we're blocking those, number of days until the password expires, 14 minimum password length. So we're enforcing a set of conditions. So in our conditional access here, we're saying that your device has to be marked as compliant. The device that you're coming from has to meet the conditions that you're defining within your policy here. If it doesn't meet those conditions, even if you met the other conditions like using a password MFA challenge, you'll still be denied access. So we'll select a couple of these and press select. And then so we selected 3 controls over here, and then you could create a policy. So if you look at some of the ones that we already created, so that's creating it from a blank canvas. You're selecting all the options that you want, and you're applying it to the users and the applications that you want the policy to apply to and to protect. The other thing you can do is work from a template. So in here, you've got templates that talk about zero trust, secure foundations, security for information registration, block legacy authentication. Zero trust, for example, requires multi-factor authentication for admins, requires multi-factor authentication for risky sign-ins, protect administrators. And as you can see here, if you look at the view, if you want to look at this, like requires multi-factor authentication for admins, it will give you what it's doing. So what the template scenarios are, exclude users, current user, include role. So it's applying it to the directory roles instead of applying to a specific user or group. It's applying to all cloud applications, and it's granting access requires multi-factor authentication. So it's enforcing MFA for all of these roles. So as a user, if you have any of these roles applied to your security administrator, then you're going to be challenged for MFA.
So Saj, quick question for you on the admin accounts, for example, break glass account, right?
Yeah.
How what's the best recommendation? Because I know that's a generic account. If you put a phone MFA, then that person has to be there. And then, like, what have you seen, or what have you done for those kind of scenarios?
So if what we tend to do is, and if you look at some of the Microsoft best practices I was reading through, they recommend having 2 break glass accounts. And if you look at policy, so if you go back a bit, and they recommend different authentication. So if you can enable MFA, which is not always recommended for your break glass accounts, have 2 different ones. So have FIDO2 key, for example, for one, have authenticator for the other. They don't recommend SMS, so they don't recommend text messaging. If you're going to enable MFA, if you're not going to enable MFA, what we've seen is that you will create a password 60 characters long, 90 characters long, and we break it into 3 shards, and 3 different users hold that break glass account. So when a break glass account is invoked, those 3 users need to bring those shards together to have that one password to be able to log in. And then it's changed immediately once the break glass account is used. So you create a couple of users, you deploy into a security group, and when you create conditional access policies, if you look at our policies, if you take this one, MFA for global admins, when you look at users, you would exclude the break glass accounts here. So you have a security group in here that you would exclude with the break glass accounts, and you would exclude that break glass account in every single policy that you apply. So most recently, what we've been doing is creating two as recommended by Microsoft. One is protected by something like FIDO2 keys, but in every instance, we'll create the passwords 60 characters long, 90 characters long, and then shard that password into 3 shards and give it to 3 different stakeholders. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, the password thing is kind of blown away because, like, yeah, you need 3 people. That's a long password. So,
Yes.
and I take it those are all privileged accounts, right? Like the break glass. I take it those are either global admins or really the high privileged accounts,
Yes.
or are you even putting like user admins or even maybe identity admins or even I take it nothing on the reader side, right? These are all the high privilege accounts then.
Yeah. So for the break glass accounts, we're only creating 2 and we're giving them global admin privileges.
Yep.
And they're purely there for an emergency.
Yep.
And
Makes
then
sense.
we're having different conditions applied to different users. So one of the things what we're doing is, if you look at policies I've got configured in here. So if you look at policies, we touched on this briefly. If I got it in here. Yeah. So we looked at device filtering, which is, I find this really interesting and it's really powerful. So what we're looking at here. So what filtering does, it gives you the capability to say, not only do you need username, password, and an MFA, and you can enforce MFA using like FIDO2 keys, for example. You can say you can come from a specific device only. So the device is enrolled in Entra ID. So if you look at devices and we look at all devices, so you can say your device enrolled in Entra ID, and then you can take a look at some of the device identifiers like device ID, object ID. You also have this extension attribute, so you can apply an attribute to the devices that you're enrolling into Entra ID, and then in conditional access, you can define the conditions in here. So when you look at your device policy here, you can say, now you can have this, you can use this 2 ways. So what we're doing is we're applying it to users and we're using the device as an exception. So we're saying this is a block policy. So if you're not coming from this particular devices, you're blocked, or we're excluding the devices in here. Now, in this example, I'm using a device ID from a test device. This doesn't really scale. I think there's a 6,000 character limit. It might be 4,000, but I think it's 6,000 if I remember correctly. So if you want to apply this in a large organization, you probably want to tag so those extension attributes, give it a custom extension, and then in here you can create an expression that says device ID or extension attribute 1, extension attribute 2. You can have 1 or more extensions depending on how secure you want to be, and tag that device with multiple extensions, and then you say equals whatever your extension is, and then those devices that you want to allow in are then tagged to those particular extensions, 1 or more that you define. So now essentially becomes 4-factor. You've got username, password, MFA, and you're limiting it to the physical device that you want to come from. The other thing that you can do with conditional access is we looked at the locations element. So not only then do you need a device, you can say, so like government organizations, again, we spoke about, if you're funneling all your traffic out of a particular proxy, so you got a known egress IP address, even if that's point to site VPN from your devices, so they're coming in, but all traffic's been going across the internet into your environment out of an egress IP, you can say you can only come from that particular IP address. So you can define that IP as an accepted location and define that in your conditional access policy. So you're tying it down and you're making it harder for bad actors to be able to compromise your environment, your applications. So this is, you wouldn't want to do this for everyone, but for privileged users that have high levels of access in your environment, global administrators, security administrators, privileged role administrators. They're the kind of policies that you have. And then you have, if you're publishing our applications, and we haven't, when we've looked at target resources, there are particular applications. If your applications are line of business applications and they're enrolled into Intune, you can then apply app protection policies. So you can onboard applications into here, and then you can define app protection policies around what applications can do. And then your devices are compliant to username, password, MFA, but then also subject to the app protection policies that you define in here. And those app protection policies apply to the application. So if you're running the application on a BYOD device, it could be that when you're using that device, you can't take any screenshots. You can't save any data from that application to anywhere on that particular device itself, if it's a tablet or any of the cloud locations that are defined within that application. So it really depends what you're looking to protect, and a combination of the conditional access policies and combined with something like Intune for applications or some of the device filtering capability that you have now within here, it becomes a really powerful tool, and you can apply it very granularly, and you can have different policies for different perceived threats within your organization. Standard users, you might necessarily want to not apply all these conditions, but privileged users, there's a lot of these conditions that you'd want to consider, and then you might want to consider different kind of conditions for different users. So, what kind of devices are you looking at? Physical devices, virtual devices. Do you want physical devices for some users, virtual devices for others? So these policies also apply to your AVD environment, or if you've got Windows 11 in the cloud, it'll apply to those as well. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. Cool. I just rant sometimes, so just tell me to shut up sometimes. Especially if I go off on a tangent. So we've looked at policies, we've looked at its capabilities, we've looked at what it does. So it's on report only mode. You've logged in, you want to have a look at what's happening. So if you look at monitoring, if you look at your signing logs, it'll give you who signed in, where they were signing in from, what happened, conditional access not applied. But if you select the user, it actually gives you lots of information about basic information about the user, the location they're coming from, the device they were using, and then conditional access. So requires multi-factor authentication, MFA user. So if you've got conditions that are applying to that user, they'll all be listed here. Policies that are configured in report only mode that are listed here. So if the conditions are applying, you're happy, then you can enable it. If you've seen a policy in here that's been applied to your user that shouldn't be applied and then it's enabled, you might want to go investigate why that's happening. The other thing you can do is, if you look at conditional access and policies, and you want to create a new policy, the other thing somebody might have noticed is this what if. So if you look in here, you define certain things. So if we select a user, again, let's select Betty Blue as our test user. Select a country, United Kingdom. Device and platform, give it Windows. And then if you scroll down to here, what if you scroll down a bit, it says IP address. Okay, let's give this an IP address. 10.0.0.12. So if you look here, it says policies that apply. So filtering will be, so again, the state is in, but policies that will apply if they were enabled. So these policies will apply to this particular user. You can investigate whether you want to apply these policies or you don't want to apply these policies to this particular user. The other thing you can look at is policies that don't apply. So right now, none of these policies would apply to this particular user if they were enabled. And these policies are enabled, but they're not applying to that particular user. So you might want to have a look at why they're not applying to that particular user. And if you wanted to apply some of these policies, but in the report only mode now, they're telling you they're not applying, you might want to investigate why they're not applying to that particular user. The other thing I forgot to mention was, if you look at the templates, as well as the view of what the template is doing, you can actually download the JSON file. If you go to the location, let me say open. So you could download the file, open it, and it actually shows you what the policy looks like as a JSON file. So if you view word wrap, so it tells you, what's being configured, include all users, exclude all guest users. And then you can use this as a template to create the policies that you wanted to, and then you can upload policies that you configured or written in JSON format. Something I'm not that good at, but you could use this as a template. If you wanted to, client applications, it applies to all client applications. And then it shows you what you can do in what's been configured in a particular JSON format. And then you could take this as a template and then just configure your own if you wanted to, and then just upload the template when you're creating a policy in new policies. I'll leave that. And then conditional access policies, and then upload policy in this particular file. You just upload a JSON file to give you a new conditional access policy if you wanted to do it using code as opposed to doing it through the GUI like I've been demoing today. And I think that's the end of the demo. Any questions, anyone?
I haven't seen any out there.
Stop sharing for a moment so I can find you guys again on the screen.
No worries. Awesome. No, great demo.
Yeah, that was actually great. A lot of great information there. So yeah.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I think so. One of the things, and I think we all tend to do it. We configure something in our environment, and we're like, oh yeah, when we demo, maybe we, I believe the what if stuff. There's some preview features, right? So, like, if folks didn't see that entire long line of things to filter on or test or whatever else, I believe there's a little just a tweak that you got to make to the preview features, right? I don't know how long it's been there. I can't recall, but because some of the newer filtering is just popped up overnight. I think over the past few months or so, right?
It's not something I've turned on. It's just popped up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I've not enabled it. It's just there now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So.
Yeah, that's something new as well. So for even for the group security groups, right? Same thing. You can go in there, and especially for the dynamic ones, if you want to take a look. So yeah, I love this feature. It's very nice, handy when you're in production environment. You don't want to basically do it out. You want to just kind of test it out. So yeah.
Yeah, so dynamic groups based on conditions that you define. Users get added to those groups, and then they get into the conditional access policy. Yeah, that's really good. It's a pretty cool feature, that one.
Awesome.
Okay. With that being said, I know it's late for Sajid, so I don't see any questions.
I mean, we can just ask one more time, but if anybody has, please send them now. Otherwise, I'm sure we can catch up online too. We're all connected, the socials, the whole 9 yards too. So after the fact, if anybody's got anything else they want to reach out,
sure. If someone reach out directly, my Twitter handle's there anyway, Sajid Cloud, and just reach out. I'm more on Twitter than LinkedIn, to be honest with you. I am on both, but I'll probably respond faster on Twitter than anything else.
Beautiful.
Okay. With that being said, thank you so much, Sajid. Really appreciate your time. It was a very good session, a great demo, and then hopefully we'll have you back soon then.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for everybody. Have a good night.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next time.